Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or The Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going in depth into my week number 14 wide receiver start or sit decisions. We're going to be talking about every single game from Thursday Night Football all the way until Monday Night Football, and I'll be telling you guys whether I think you should start or sit the wide receivers in all of those matchups. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. We're going to be talking about our sponsorship with DraftKings a little bit later. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 14 wide receiver start or sit decisions. We begin with Thursday Night Football, the Las Vegas Raiders going up against the LA Rams in LA. In this matchup, there's only one wide receiver that I actually want to start, and that is Davante Adams. Now, he did end up having a down game in week number 12, but last week, up against the LA Chargers, he stepped up and had yet another huge performance. This guy is just destined to score 25-plus points in basically every single game. Now, the LA Rams defense was a little bit surprising last week up against the Seattle Seahawks, as they definitely woke up in that matchup and looked probably the best the Rams defense has looked all season, if I'm being honest with you. But ultimately, again, when you have a wide receiver of the stature, the skill set of Davante Adams, you are going to be starting him regardless of the matchup. The other players in this game for the Raiders, they have Matt Collins, Keelan Cole Sr. Now, Matt Collins is somewhat involved in this offense, so it wouldn't surprise me if he somehow cracked the top 32 by scoring a touchdown or something in this game. But ultimately, he's not a guy that I'd be banging the drum to start, so he's a sit. Keelan Cole Sr. is going to be a sit as well. For the Rams, if there was a gun to my head and I needed to start one of these guys, of Van Jefferson, Ben Skoranek, and Tutu Atwell, it would end up being Van Jefferson. I do think that he is an immensely talented player. The problem is the situation just really isn't the best in LA. Next up, we begin with the beginning of the Sunday slate with the New York Jumbo Jets at the Buffalo Bills. Garrett Wilson coming off back-to-back Michael Jordan 96-97 heaters of games with Magic Mike White under center. Now, obviously, the Buffalo Bills matchup is no wet dream, right? This is going to be an incredibly tough matchup for the Jets offense, but I do expect Mike White to be able to throw the ball a decent amount to Garrett Wilson. Now, we saw last week that Mike White got the Joe Flacco treatment because the motherfucker threw the ball 50-plus times in that matchup last week up against the Minnesota Vikings. Do I expect him to have to throw the ball that much in this game? Honestly, it wouldn't shock me because the Buffalo Bills are an incredibly good team, and the Buffalo Bills could be up big, and the Jets are going to have to crawl back on into the game. Now, am I saying that is guaranteed to happen? Of course not, because the New York Jets have one of the best defenses in the National Football League. But again, when we look at defenses like the Jets, some people start to panic. They start to get nervous that, oh, you know what, Stephon Diggs is going to have a bad game. Now, last time out, Jets versus Bills, Stephon Diggs didn't really do all that well. But again, when you're looking at a defense that's super good, if you have a superstar wide receiver like Stephon Diggs, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Some people might argue, mostly Bills fans, that Diggs is the best receiver in the NFL. So you're still going to start him regardless. Gabe Davis is one of those guys that's kind of a bottom of the barrel start. He's someone that I describe every single week as the basic definition of boomer bust at the wide receiver position. There are going to be games where Gabe Davis catches 3 balls, gets 30 yards, and does nothing, doesn't score a touchdown. But there's also games where Gabe Davis has 3 targets, 3 receptions, 120 yards, and 2 touchdowns, right? Gabe Davis has that big play upside in him. Now, this matchup does worry me a lot more when it comes to Gabe Davis, so he's not a guy that I'm banging the drum for aggressively this week, but I would see myself starting him in a lot of situations. Corey Davis is a fringe guy that is close to being a start. He was fed relatively well last week by Magic Mike White, but again, they do have a lot of weapons outside of Garrett Wilson, but Garrett Wilson is the main guy. Elijah Moore is also a little bit interesting, but I definitely would prefer Corey Davis over Elijah Moore. The Buffalo Bills have a bunch of other wide receivers that they use as well. Isaiah McKenzie is a guy that you need a touchdown to be start worthy, and again, in a matchup up against the Jets where this might not really end up being a super high scoring game, I'm going to leave McKenzie on the bench. Next up, we move to the Cleveland Browns at the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, it is important to note that Joe Burrow, Joe Shiesty, has never beaten the Browns. Now, I know last time out, Jamar Chase was out, but the Browns and Jacoby Brissett shit down the throat of the Bengals. And again, I'm not saying that what happened in the past is guaranteed to happen yet again on Sunday. I'm not saying that the Bengals are going to get the piss beat out of them by the Browns, but what I will tell you is this rivalry, at least with Joe Burrow being there, has been one where the Browns have gotten the better of them every single time. Now, the fact that Deshaun Watson looked like a steaming pile of shit in last week's game could mean that the Bengals go off on him, right? But I am worried that this one might end up being a sneaky, lower-scoring game. Amari Cooper, even with Deshaun Watson really shitting the bed, still had an all-right game. I think there was a lot going into what happened last week. Like, there's a lot of emotion when it comes to Watson and the Houston Texans. Maybe he needed to go in the blue tent and tug one out, and then go out there and he would have played a little bit better. But ultimately, I still do believe that Amari Cooper and this offense, they're going to figure shit out. Again, I'm not 100% confident in it, though, because, again, Watson looked like Sam Darnold out there, like he was seeing some ghosts. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are must-starts every single week. I know T. Higgins nor Jamar Chase really had all that big of a game last week up against the Kansas City Chiefs, but, again, both of these guys are must-starts every single week. I know, again, last time out, this game was a bit of a snooze fest, but there's always the upside when it comes to Joe Burrow that he could just light the Cleveland Browns defense on fire and smoke them like a blunt. Donovan Peoples-Jones is relatively close to being a start. He's one of those guys that's pretty close. He didn't have a great game last week, but that's because of Deshaun Watson. If Watson didn't play, again, nut low, like the worst we've ever seen Deshaun Watson play, then Donovan Peoples-Jones probably has a very solid performance. But again, right here, I'm just going to sit him. But if you had to start him, again, there's a bunch of teams on bye this week, so there's a lot worse starts than Donovan Peoples-Jones. David Bell is a sit. Tyler Boyd always has that upside, even when both Chase and Higgins are healthy, but it's much harder to bet on, so he is going to be a sit as well. Next up, we move to the Houston Texans at the Dallas Cowboys. Here, we're going to be comfortable starting up CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb had a pretty decent performance last week up against the Indianapolis Colts in a game in which the Indianapolis Colts, at the beginning, it was like, ooh, this game's a little bit sneaky. Now, I thought that that game was going to be a blowout. I thought from the first whistle to the end of the game, the Cowboys were just going to be dogging that team. I thought it was so easy for the Cowboys. And then early on, you're like, wow, is Jeff Saturday doing this? Is Matt Ryan going to be able to somehow overcome the Cowboys defense? Ashton Doolin fucking burns Trayvon Diggs, and it's like, oh wow, maybe we got a game on our hands. And then in like the third quarter, the ass whooping began and the Cowboys defense took over. Dak didn't even have to do much in the second half and they blew him out. The Texans defense is also terrible. I understand that they looked pretty good last week because Deshaun Watson played terribly, but I do think the Cowboys are going to blow out the Texans. CeeDee Lamb should have a good game. The only worry is that they bench CeeDee Lamb in the second half because they're just destroying the Texans. Brandon Cooks, Nico Collins, and Chris Moore are all going to be sits for me. Nico Collins is an incredibly interesting player as he did end up scoring a garbage time touchdown up against the Browns last week, and he's been pretty decent. But at the end of the day, do I really trust Kyle Allen to get the ball to Nico Collins, Brandon Cooks, or Chris Moore up against the Cowboys defense? The answer is simple. It is fuck no, baby. Michael Gallup is pretty interesting as well. If you are in need of a starting wide receiver because you're dealing with a bunch of bye weeks and you picked him up, then sure, you could play him up against the Texans. But in reality, he didn't really have all that great game up against the Indianapolis Colts. He just scored 2 touchdowns. Now, I'm not saying that's a fluke. You can't just take the touchdowns away from the guy. But ultimately, if you did take away the touchdowns, he ended up shitting the bed, but again, not going to take those away. Noah Brown is going to be a sit as well. Next up, we move to the Minnesota Vikings at the Detroit Lions, but before we break down this game in depth at the wide receiver position, as well as the rest of the games all the way up until Monday Night Football, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor of today's video over at DraftKings Sportsbook. Now, if you're a brand new user to DraftKings Sportsbook and you click on the link in the video description down below or in the pinned comment and you bet $5 on any sport pregame money line, if your bet hits, you will win $150 in free bets. So I'm going to throw DraftKings up onto the screen right now. And since college football is coming to a close, we're at the point of college football where it's bowl season. We're going to go towards college basketball because I think those have the bets that are most guaranteed to hit. So we're going to go with Arkansas minus 4,000 versus UNC Greensboro. Bet $5 on that, and as long as they win, which they should, or you can go with whatever pick you want, you'll receive $150 in free bets if your team wins. Also important to note that if you live in Maryland, you will actually be given $200 in free bets instead of $150 if you live in the other legal states. These free bets are valid for only 7 days, 168 hours, so make sure that you take advantage of the free bets after you get them. So back on into things here, we move to the Vikings at the Detroit Lions, and shockingly, the Lions at home are the favorites in this game. Now, I know for weeks on weeks, we've kind of talked about how I like the Vikings, but they feel a little bit fraudulent. They don't feel like they're as good as their record says. Now, they've had big games. They've beaten the Bills. They played really good against the Jets. So I'm not saying that the Vikings are complete frauds and that they don't deserve to be a playoff team, because of course they deserve to be a playoff team. The majority of the NFC sucks absolute fucking asshole. So if they make the playoffs and they go on a run, they're going to make the playoffs. They could clinch this weekend, I believe, their division if they beat the Lions. So they're obviously going to make the playoffs and they could make a run. But all I'm saying is that they aren't as good as some people might say, but it feels like everyone kind of thinks how I think, and it doesn't seem like anyone, except for maybe Vikings fans, are really banging the drum aggressively for them, and maybe we've all been hoodwinked. Maybe the Vikings are really good, and I'm just a fucking idiot. Justin Jefferson is a must start every single week. Doesn't matter if he's playing the garbage Detroit Lions defense or he's playing the 85 Bears, you're gonna fucking play him. This week, lucky enough, he gets the Lions, one of the softest defenses in the NFL. I expect Justin Jefferson to go to pound town on the on the Detroit Lions defense. Same thing could be said for Amon-Ra St. Brown, who went absolutely nuclear up against the Jacksonville Jaguars last week. This game reeks of points. You can smell it through the screen. You just look at the Vikings logo, you look at the Lions logo, you got two of the worst pass defenses in the NFL. You like that? I like that. This seems very, very fun. Seems like Justin Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown have the upside to be the number 1 and number 2 wide receiver on the week. Now, Adam Thielen continues to get heavily targeted game in and game out. Last week up against the Jets, he didn't end up seeing as many targets, but on the season as a whole, he's a guy that gets targeted pretty heavily by the team. The problem is those targets never really end up turning into a bunch of fantasy points. He's always a guy that ends up being like close to wide receiver 32. So he's always start worthy, but he never really takes that crazy amount of targets and some pretty highly accurate passes from Kirk Cousins into a meaningful fantasy day. But the Lions could make the worst wide receiver in the NFL look like prime fucking Randy Moss. So Adam Thielen is going to be a start for me. KJ Osborne is going to be a sit. They really don't use him very much at all this season. Looking back, it's hilarious that on Instagram, KJ Osborne posted a picture of Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, and him, and it was like the flight squad because Top Gun just came out. There's like 3 jets over him, and then KJ Osborne hasn't done shit all season, but I'm not saying he's a bad player or anything. I just think that's kind of funny. DJ Chark, wiki, DJ Chark is going to be a sit for me. Now, DJ Chark, Jameson Williams, any of these guys could go off because, again, the Vikings defense is absolute dog shit up against the pass. But again, when you have Jameson Williams, he might be ramped up to more target share, more snap share. He might be playing a lot more in this game, and that could hurt DJ Chark. It could benefit Jameson Williams. But until I see Jameson Williams do it, he's a guy that I want on my fantasy team, just not a guy that I would be ecstatic to roll out, and I definitely wouldn't want to start him this week. Next up, we got the Philadelphia Eagles at the New York Football Giants. This game should be pretty fun. A.J. Brown took a deuce on his former team, the Les Titans, last week. It was so bad that the Titans actually fired their general manager today. I don't know why they fired him. I assume because, you know, they traded away A.J. Brown, and then A.J. Brown just laid the hammer Thor style to their team last week. Devontae Smith is pretty hit or miss. He's another one of those boomer bust guys. We've seen Devontae Smith finish as high as the wide receiver 1 at points in this season, or at one point in the season, and then we've seen him finish as low as wide receiver 130. So obviously, while he is a boom bust player, this is a relatively solid matchup, and that boom bust really just comes with the fact that this team has so many weapons weapons on it. They are fully loaded. They got A.J. Brown. They got Devontae Smith. Next week, they should have Dallas Goedert back. They have Miles Sanders. They have Quez Watkins, who's relatively solid as well. Kenneth Gainwell. They've got a lot of guys that can catch passes on this team, and that obviously has an impact on both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, but at the same time, you are obviously going to be more content and more confident in starting A.J. Brown because he is the quote-unquote alpha wide receiver in this offense. Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown are both start-worthy, but I do like A.J. Brown a considerable amount more. Darius Slayton is one of those guys that you're kind of down bad at wide receiver, so you play this matchup does kind of reek for him in a negative fashion. The Philadelphia Eagles have a really good defense, one of the best defenses in all of the NFL, so I don't think this is a smash game for him, but again, if you're fiending for someone to start, maybe off the waiver wire, he's been picked up in a lot of leagues, so maybe he's chilled on your bench, you need someone to start, it's fucking Bipocalypse, Armageddon, whatever you want to call it, and then you play Darius Slayton. But again, not a guy that I'm banging the drum aggressively for. Quez Watkins is going to be a sit. We all know deep down that once every couple of weeks, Watkins is going to score some 60-yard touchdown where Jalen Hurts just fucking throws a missile to him, and it's going to look beautiful. You're going to see it on fucking Sports Center Top 10. Shout out to Jack Harlow. So, yeah, I do think that Quez Watkins is a good player. But again, there's just so many cooks in the kitchen there in Philadelphia. Richie James Jr., Isaiah Hodgins scored a touchdown last week. Outside of Darius Slayton, the Giants are, Daniel Jones is throwing to a bunch of fucking McDonald's employees out there. It's truly tough to see. Next up, we got the Baltimore Ravens at the Pittsburgh Steelers. And back to the Giants real quick. Fucking Kenny Golladay must be like the manager of the McDonald's because this guy is raking in cash for being absolutely fucking terrible. Back into the Ravens at the Pittsburgh Steelers, a coveted matchup. I saw on the Pat McAfee show, it was either this morning or yesterday, that he said that he called Mike Tomlin trying to interview him, and Mike Tomlin basically said that, hey, it's Ravens week, I ain't got time for you, you motherfucker, basically. It was pretty funny, and then if you guys saw that clip, during the game last week up against the Falcons for the Steelers, going into halftime, one of the fans said, hey, Mike, good luck, blah, blah, blah. And then Mike Tomlin's like, shut the fuck up. I got to get ready for the second half of the game or whatever. It was very funny if you saw the clip. Again, I paraphrased it, so that's not exactly what Mr. Tomlin said. Mike Tomlin is a very interesting coach. It seemed like a lot of people were calling for him to get fired early on the season, but we all know the Steelers don't fire coaches, and we all know that Mike Tomlin's too good to be fired. George Pickens is going to be a start now. He had a disaster-filled game up against the Atlanta Falcons. The man had 1 catch for 2 yards. There were reports that George Pickens was acting like fucking prime Antonio Brown, doing some crazy shit on the sideline, yelling about how they need to throw him the fucking ball. Now, I do agree with you, George Pickens, because you are one of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL, but come on, man, your team won the game. There's no need to get that fucking pissy, all right? Antonio Brown behavior. So maybe George Pickens will be one of the best wide receivers that I've ever seen, because that sure was the case with Antonio Brown. Pickens is a start. Deontay Johnson is on the fringe of being a start. He's another one of those guys where it's extremely frustrating to start him, because when you watch the game, you will see that Kenny Pickett throws the ball to this guy like 10 times a game. Now, again, that's just an estimate, but yeah, around like 10 times a game. And sometimes, like, it's right in his hands and he drops it, or the ball's just sailed a little too far away from him. And it's incredibly frustrating because when most players get that high of a target share, when they're that much of a focal piece in the offense, they're fucking feasting. They're eating. And then Deontay Johnson just isn't doing that. Last year, the guy was amazing with Big Ben. I don't necessarily think that it is the fault of Kenny Pickett or Mitch Trubisky when he was the starting quarterback, but it does definitely suck ass to have drafted a guy that continues to see a crazy high amount of targets game in and game out, and things just don't end up working out for him. So Deontay Johnson is a sit. All of the Ravens wide receivers are a sit. Tyler Huntley should be under center in this game. Lamar Jackson's injury, based upon what I read, should be taking him out at least 1, 2, 3 weeks. So anywhere from he'll be back this week, which I don't see happening, and 3 weeks from now. That obviously sucks for the Ravens, but Tyler Huntley is sneaky good, so I wouldn't necessarily throw it out of the equation that the Ravens could win this game, but I certainly wouldn't be advocating for that, and I definitely won't be advocating for any other wide receivers in this spot. Next up, we move to a matchup between the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Atlanta Titans. Christian Kirk is coming off of a pretty decent game. Trevor Lawrence ended up getting hurt right before the half of the game, and it looked like Trevor Lawrence was done for maybe a year, right? It looked like that was a very serious injury. It looked like, damn, Lawrence finally started to put things together, right? He went through all of this bullshit with Urban Meyer. He gets a new head coach. He starts the season off all right, but he starts to finally hit his stride. He's looking really good. It's like, damn, that's why the Jaguars drafted him #1 overall. That's why everyone was basically sucking this guy off. Coming out into the NFL draft, and obviously I was too, right? He looked like one of the best prospects we've ever seen, and then fuck, it's over. He's hurt. He's not going to be able to get back up. He's done for. This is a season. It's a wrap on Trevor Lawrence. It sucks, but it is what it is. And then, miraculously, this guy rises from the fucking dead and ends up coming back. Not only he comes back into the game, plays well when he comes back. Now, obviously, they still ended up losing that game. It was just too much in that game, but still very impressive that he ended up coming back, and very good for the upside of Christian Kirk and Zay Jones, because if we were dealing with a backup, even with how good Christian Kirk is, we'd probably be sitting Christian Kirk down, and obviously Zay Jones is like an ancillary piece, so he would definitely have been a sit, but now we got T-Law back. Christian Kirk is in the driver's seat here. The Titans do have a pretty solid defense, but again, Lawrence has looked so good that I just have some blind trust at this point in Christian Kirk, who has had multiple really good games this season. Shout out to Christian Kirk and Trevor Lawrence, because using our tools at Stokastic for DFS, the link is in the description down below, for 3 free days of our NFL Stokastic package for DFS, I won $5,000 on DraftKings, the sponsor of today's video, and it felt great. Shout out to Trevor Lawrence, Christian Kirk. I posted the team on Twitter, so if you follow me on there, you can easily find that. So, shout out to them. Zay Jones is also pretty interesting. Again, I don't necessarily think this is the best of matchups, but Lawrence seems to trust him, so I'm going to keep rolling him out. Treylon Burks made one of the most impressive catches in a while that I've seen. Not because he caught the ball and held on to the ball, but it's because he got so hurt while catching the ball and was somehow able to hold on to it. I honestly don't think Treylon Burks is going to end up playing this week, but if he did, I'd assume he'd be at 100% if they cleared him to play, right? I don't think they're really fucking around with head injuries nowadays, so if he's hurt, he's not going to play, but if he's good to go, then he should be, realistically, he should be healthy, so I would play Burks up against the Jaguars defense. This guy has been really impressive over the last couple of weeks. Marvin Jones has it in him to score a touchdown in any given week, but it's very hard to predict. Nick Westbrook, Ikayin, and Robert Woods, these guys are just disasters for the Tennessee Titans. Next up, we move to the Kansas City Chiefs, and even if we don't see Burks play, I'm not playing Robert Woods or Westbrook Ikayin anyways. We move to the Chiefs at the Denver Broncos. This game was originally supposed to be Sunday Night Football, but no one wants to watch Mr. Unlimited play football in prime time, so they kicked his ass out for my Dolphins versus the Los Angeles Chargers that we're going to be talking about relatively soon. Again, there are so many buys this week that this video is going to be a little bit short, just like our boy Kyler Murray. So Juju Smith-Schuster up against the Broncos. He's been back the last 2 weeks, but he hasn't really been fully back, right? They haven't put the keys all the way in the ignition for Juju Smith-Schuster, which makes him an incredibly risky player here. The upside is very high. The downside is that he won't play as many snaps, maybe won't be as targeted as much. Now, the Broncos also have a very solid defense, so my outlook on Juju Smith-Schuster this week isn't incredibly high. The talent is there. The situation is really good when he's fully healthy, but do we know he's fully healthy? Not really. When it comes to the other Chiefs wide receivers, MVS, Sky with 2 Ys more, Kadarius Toney, I just don't really see myself playing any of these guys because of how much Patrick Mahomes spreads the ball out. He likes to throw the ball. He's like fucking Oprah. You get a pass. You get a pass. You all get a pass, right? He's throwing the ball to fucking everyone, and obviously that hurts the other wide receivers. If Jerry Jeudy is good to go and Cortland Sutton ends up missing, I am going to play Jerry Jeudy, but again, my confidence in anyone on the Broncos with Mr. Unlimited, the fucking worst quarterback I've ever seen, grace God Green's earth, it is fucking embarrassing, dude. dude. It is fucking hard to watch game in and game out this stupid fuck Broncos country. Let's ride go out there. But if Jeudy is the guy, then I'm going to play him. Again, not with that much confidence, though. Courtland Sutton, I don't think he's going to play. Kendall Hinton is a sit as well. Next up, we move to the Carolina Panthers at the Seattle Seahawks. The Panthers end up cutting Baker Mayfield because Baker wanted to get cut. There's reports he might sign with the Niners, the Rams. We shall see. Obviously, that would impact what we talk about in today's video. But again, we don't know enough right now for me to be like, oh, Baker's definitely a Ram or he's definitely a 49er, because I don't even know if the 49ers even want him. Like, he's really not that good. I saw some reports also that Matt Ryan wants out to go back with Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco. I also don't think that's going to happen, but figured I'd bring it up because it is a talking point that we might have to talk about later on in the week, maybe tomorrow with the quarterback video, depending on when this news releases. So Panthers at Seattle, back on into the main point of the video. DJ Moore had a fantastic game. They did have a bye last week, so the week prior to that, mono man Sam Darnold was under center, and the boy was feasting with him there. I don't necessarily think that DJ Moore's a guy that I want to be throwing too much trust into, right? Just a little bit of trust. I do think Sam Darnold is the best quarterback they have on the roster. That's not saying much, though, because it's not like Sam Darnold is amazing. We did see at the beginning of last year that it seemed like Sam Darnold was going to just, it's like, oh my God, Adam Gase did some type of crazy shit that just ruined this guy's career. And then he was going to show up in Carolina and he's stunned for the first, it was either 3 or 4 weeks. He was looking incredible. And then after that, obviously, everything kind of went a bit downhill. But here up against Seattle, the Seattle defense is a little bit underrated. I will say that. They didn't have a great game last week, though. Important to note. I think DJ Moore is good enough to be start-worthy here, but it's going to be hard for me to rank him super high, even though I do like the matchup, because of the fact that we all know that DJ Moore is incredibly inconsistent, and that one great game out of Sam Darnold, or decent game out of Sam Darnold, doesn't necessarily mean that's what we're always going to see out of Darnold. When it comes to the Seattle wide receivers, we did see both DK Metcalf as well as Tyler Lockett have very solid performances last week. Both of these guys are must starts every single week. I know if you go back and dig into the videos I had prior to this season, I was definitely really down on the Seattle Seahawks offense as a whole. I really didn't think Geno Smith was going to be all of that good, but again, I've kind of apologized for this so many times. I was fucking wrong. Geno Smith's amazing, and Metcalf and Tyler Lockett can certainly do big damage to the Carolina Panthers defense, but I will again note the Panthers defense is a little bit sneaky good. Terrace Marshall, Laviska Shenault are going to be sits for me, as is Marquise Goodwin, I should say. Goodwin actually at one point in this season was interesting when one of Metcalf or Lockett was hurt. It was Metcalf. But with both of them healthy, there's no way you could trust Goodwin. Next up, we move into the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the San Francisco 49ers, and the Buccaneers do it yet again. It feels like every single time the game is on the line, Tom Brady has the ball at the end of the game, that you already know what the fuck is going to happen. You already know that Tom Brady is going to somehow drive all the way down the field with his back against the wall while he's playing like Stevie Wonder in the pocket the whole game. He's making all these stupid throws. He has Mike Evans wide open, but instead he throws the ball 70 yards down the field to Scotty fucking Miller, and magically, somehow, some way, Tom Brady wins the game. It is like a broken record. It's something I've seen a million times. At the beginning of the game, I made a tweet that got a decent amount of likes. Not something crazy, obviously. It got like 40 likes, which is good for me. And I was like, Tom Brady really ruined his family for this. And then once the game was coming to a close, I think the fourth quarter started, I tweeted, Tom Brady is going to win this game, isn't he? Right? Like, Tom Brady always does this shit. It's like clockwork. You can just set your brain to know the fact that if Tom Brady's down late in the game up against some division rival, he is going to somehow unleash 30-year-old Tom Brady and just slap the shit out of the defense. And that is exactly what he did. One of his game-winning drives with the least amount of time left on the clock in his career. It was top 4, I believe. I don't know if it was number 1 or number 2. I think it was number 2. There was like 8 seconds left in the game. The guy's amazing. Even if he sucks through the first 3 quarters, this is going to be a tough matchup for him. The Niners defense does really concern me. Godwin did score a touchdown in last night's game, but they did call it back due to some tic-tac holding call. Godwin did play good, though. Mike Evans, not so much for some reason. What the fuck is wrong with me? For some reason, Tom Brady was just not looking the way of Mike Evans last week, but I see that changing here up against the Niners. I don't really think the Bucs have that great of a game, but you never know. It is Tom Brady. After all, Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk with Brock Purdy under center, that definitely throws a wrench into things here. Deebo made a catch in that game, or it was a run, one or the other, where the Dolphins, it was behind the line of scrimmage, the Dolphins all around it. There's like literally 3 dudes surrounding him. Just surrounding him in like a triangle formation, like he's like the president and they're the Secret Service, right? They're just all around him. Bodyguards, they're tackling him. Somehow this man like does some fucking Matrix move and gets out of it. And I thought at that second, this game is over. The Dolphins are going to lose. This motherfucker is going to somehow dodge 3 guys tackling him, duck underneath, and run into the end zone. Didn't happen, but something just told me that was scary. Deebo, again, I will continue to note, this guy has only been good this year. Well, not good, because he's been good, but his only great games where he's doing what you drafted him to do were in primetime. This game isn't primetime. But again, Deebo, Brandon Ayuk, you're still going to start him. Julio Jones, Juwan Jennings are going to be sits. Next up, we move to, because you waited all day for Sunday night, the Miami Dolphins at the Los Angeles Chargers. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are starts in this game. Funny enough, Morocco just scored in the World Cup to beat Spain, and the guy who scored the goal in penalties hit the Waddle. Very interesting to see Jalen Waddle's Mr. Worldwide, Mr. 305 pit bull. Tyreek Hill caught a beauty of a ball thrown by Tua Tagovailoa. Tua played, look, I'm a Dolphins fan. I keep it 100, all right? Tua Tagovailoa played scared in the first half. I honestly think, now again, I'm not Tua. What the fuck do I know? But what I think is that Teron Armstead is out, his left tackle. So he is thinking, I am about to get molested behind the offensive line. I am going to get the shit rocked out of me. So he's throwing the ball, like doing stupid ass things, like he's panicking because he thinks he's going to get destroyed behind the offensive line, put the fucking casket 6 feet under. So he's making all these stupid decisions. And then he starts to settle in the third quarter, the fourth quarter. And by then the game was gone because the refs fucked the Dolphins over. That's why I got banned on Twitter, actually. I got suspended during the game. I'm back on Twitter now for tweeting that I want the NFL officials to be shot into the sun. Fucking put them in a cannon, shoot them into the sun for their performance up against the Dolphins. They fucked us over. I'm not normally a blame the ref guy. The Dolphins also screwed themselves over, so it's not all on the refs, but I am still mad at the refs, but Tyreek had a good game. Waddle, not so much. The Chargers defense is incredibly bad. This game reeks of very high scoring. The Dolphins defense also plays like shit on the road. We saw that against the 49ers, and now they're playing up against Justin Herbert, the pervert. This game reeks of points. I like Hill. I like Waddle in this spot. Same thing goes with Keenan Allen and Joshua Palmer. Allen has been pretty decent. Joshua Palmer, pretty hit or miss, but again, this is a game that I think is going to be very high scoring. Mike Williams might play. He might not play. Until we really see him stay healthy, I don't think you want to just roll him out onto your fantasy team. Trent Sherfield's pretty interesting. He's a good player. He has a touchdown in him every once in a while, but not a guy that I'd bet on for fantasy football. Final game here, we got the New England Deflatriots at the Arizona Cardinals. Another game that could be pretty points heavy if the Patriots defense doesn't play too well, because the Patriots offense at points in this season, like I know they played terrible against the Bills, but we saw them up against the Vikings. The Patriots against not amazing defenses can get things done. Jacoby Myers is going to be start worthy, but he's one of those guys, again, that just gets a lot of volume. He struggles to score touchdowns, but at the end of the day, he's typically never going to be a bad start. Like, he's not going to be the reason why you lose, but it's very unlikely that against the Cardinals, this guy's like, even against the Cardinals, who are one of the worst defenses in the NFL, in my opinion, that he ends up being like a top 5 receiver. DeAndre Hopkins is a must start. You don't have to think twice about it. I know the Patriots defense is pretty tough, but you're going to feel like a certified fucking buffoon if you sit DeAndre Hopkins. Hollywood Brown, Marquise Brown is going to be a start here. He did play in the game prior up against the Niners. They were on bye last week. Again, this Cardinals team seems like a complete and utter unmitigated disaster. One of those fucking dumpster fires. But at the end of the day, Hollywood Brown is still good enough to start. Devontae Parker, Nelson Aguilar are sits. I think Rondell Moore should be rostered, but not started up against the Patriots. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, as well as hitting that like button. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. If you guys have any questions about week number 14, crazy to say, week 14 of the 2022 fantasy football season, make sure you leave a comment down below. Again, check out our sponsor, DraftKings. I love you guys all so much. I hope you have a great guys' day. We'll be back later with the running back starter sit video. Love you guys, as always. Good boy.